Most people don't realize how much power there is in saying less. We're used to thinking that being talkative means being confident or smart. But the truth is, the people who understand the most about others, about life, about themselves, often say the least. They listen more, they observe more, and because of that, they connect deeper, learn faster, and make fewer mistakes. This video is for you if you've ever walked away from a conversation and thought, I talked too much, or I didn't really understand what was going on. Maybe you're someone who wants to feel calmer in social situations, or maybe you're tired of speaking just to fill space and want your words to actually mean something when you use them. Either way, this is going to help you reset how you approach communication, not by talking more, but by becoming more aware, more thoughtful, and more grounded in what truly matters. In the next few minutes, we'll walk through real, everyday ways you can start speaking less and understanding more. This isn't about becoming silent or holding back your voice. It's about using your energy wisely. It's about learning to listen with care, ask questions that open people up, and build stronger trust by being fully present instead of constantly trying to add something to every moment. You'll learn how to pause before you speak so you don't regret your words. You'll understand why watching what people do tells you more than what they say. You'll practice sitting with silence without needing to break it, and you'll see how much more you gain when you focus on what others need, not just what you want to say. These are simple, but they're powerful. And the best part, you don't need anything fancy to get started. Just your willingness to slow down, shift your focus, and take control of how you show up in every conversation. If you've been looking for a way to feel more clear, more respected, and more in control of your interactions with others, this is it. Stick with me, and you'll discover how just a few daily shifts in the way you listen, respond, and connect can help you grow not only as a better communicator, but as a stronger, calmer, and more trusted version of yourself. Let's get into it. Chapter 1. Practice listening with full attention every single time. Most people think they're good listeners, but they're not. They're usually just waiting for their turn to talk. They nod, give short replies, and pretend to listen, but their minds are elsewhere, thinking about what they'll say next, what they're doing later, or how they feel about what's being said. Listening with full attention is rare, and because it's rare, it's powerful. When you truly listen to someone with all of your attention, something profound happens. They feel seen, they feel safe. They open up in a way they never would around someone who's half present. And in that silence, when you're not thinking about yourself or your response, you start to notice what you've always missed. The deeper layers, the small hesitations, the unspoken emotions, the truth that hides behind people's words. Listening with full attention doesn't just improve your relationships, it sharpens your mind. It makes you calmer, it gives you time to process things with more clarity and less emotion. It makes you less reactive and more aware. It helps you read people better, avoid conflict, and connect deeply without saying much at all. That's real strength. And it's available to anyone who's willing to discipline themselves to be fully present in conversation. To listen fully, you have to quiet your inner world. That means putting your thoughts, your judgments, your assumptions on hold. You have to be willing to stop seeing the world only through your own lens and step into the experience of someone else. This isn't easy. It takes humility. It takes patience. It takes restraint. But that's the very reason why it works. Because when you do it, people notice. They feel it. And more importantly, you change. The first thing you have to do to listen fully is slow down. Most people rush through conversations, not because they're in a hurry, but because they're uncomfortable with stillness. But when you rush, you miss everything. You miss the shift in someone's tone when they're about to say something hard. You miss the way their eyes lower when they're hurting. You miss the things they don't say. And sometimes what's not said is more important than anything they could ever say. Listening means creating space. It means giving room for pauses, for silence, for reflection. It means not interrupting just because you think you understand where the conversation is going. Most of the time, you don't. You think you do, but you're projecting, and projection is the enemy of understanding. Another step toward listening deeply is keeping your attention on the other person, not yourself. That sounds obvious, but it's not. When most people listen, they're constantly relating everything back to themselves. Someone says they're stressed, and instead of staying with that, you start talking about when you were stressed. Someone says they're scared, and you immediately talk about your own fears. It's subtle, but it shifts the focus away from them and back to you. This habit breaks connection. It tells the other person that you're more interested in your experience than in theirs. And that's not real listening. Real listening means staying with what they're saying, asking more, feeling what they feel, not analyzing, fixing, or competing, but just being there fully. To train yourself to listen better, start small. The next time you're in a conversation, notice when your mind drifts. Catch it. Bring it back. If you feel the urge to speak, pause. Ask yourself, do I really need to say this, or am I just trying to fill the silence? Try going an entire conversation without turning the focus to yourself. Don't one-up anyone. Don't give advice unless asked. Don't interrupt, just observe. Watch the other person. Listen not just to the words, but to the tone, the pace, the emotion. This kind of listening is a discipline. It requires effort, but it pays off. You'll start to notice how different people become when they feel heard. You'll see their guard drop. You'll hear things you never heard before, even from people you've known for years. And you'll also begin to understand yourself more. Because in giving someone your full attention, you create stillness inside your own mind. In that stillness, your own thoughts become clearer. Your emotions settle. You begin to see how much of your daily tension comes from rushing, reacting, and assuming instead of simply observing and absorbing. Listening also reveals the truth. Not the surface truth, but the deeper truth, the one that lives under people's masks. Most people walk around hiding their real thoughts, their pain, their uncertainty. They wear smiles they don't mean, and tell stories that leave out the hard parts. But when they sense that someone is actually listening, really listening, something changes. They soften, they stop performing, they drop their defenses, and in that moment, real connection happens. That's the moment you can't fake, and it doesn't require wisdom or brilliance or experience. It just requires presence. Another powerful benefit of listening deeply is that it protects your peace. When you stop feeling the need to jump in, to argue, to prove yourself, or to convince others of your point, you become emotionally stronger. You no longer feel the urge to control the conversation. You let others speak. You let them reveal who they are. You let them carry their own emotions without absorbing them. This detachment is not coldness. It's clarity. It allows you to respond with thought, not just with feelings. And in a world filled with noise, that kind of restraint is rare and powerful. People often ask how they can improve their relationships, build trust, be respected, or lead better. The answer almost always starts with listening. Not passive listening, not fake politeness, but intentional, focused, disciplined listening. Listening that says, I care enough to set myself aside and make space for you. When you listen this way, your relationships change, your influence grows. Your ability to see through confusion, emotion, and conflict improves. And the best part is, it costs nothing. It doesn't require status, talent, or special skills. It just requires self-control. Of course, there will be moments when you slip. You'll interrupt. You'll space out. You'll talk too much. That's part of being human. But growth comes from noticing, from being honest with yourself, from asking, did I really listen today? If the answer is no, start again. Choose to do better next time. Little by little, you'll get better. Not perfect, but better. And that's what matters. A good practice is to take a few moments after each conversation and reflect, not in a critical way, but in a curious way. Ask yourself, what did I learn? What was really being said? Was there something I missed? Over time, this reflection sharpens your awareness. It helps you see patterns in people's behavior and communication. It makes you more thoughtful in how you interact. And the more thoughtful you are, the less reactive you become. Listening is not passive. It's not about being quiet and nodding. It's active. It's alert. It's engaged. It demands effort. But that effort is what makes it meaningful. You have to fight the distractions, the mental noise, the ego. You have to choose to value understanding over being right. That's the difference between reacting and responding, between hearing and understanding. And the world doesn't need more people who talk. It needs more people who understand. You will also notice that the more you listen, the more you begin to notice what goes unsaid. You'll start to feel the energy behind people's words. You'll feel when someone is afraid. You'll hear the insecurity behind their confidence. You'll sense the sadness behind their smile. That's real communication. That's human connection. And it all starts with the simple act of paying attention. Not once in a while, not just when it's convenient, but every single time. One of the hardest parts of listening is learning not to judge. As soon as someone says something we disagree with, the mind starts to react. It labels, it evaluates, it prepares a rebuttal, but judgment blocks understanding. You can't judge someone and understand them at the same time. You have to be willing to hear people out, even if you don't agree. You have to listen to learn, not to argue. And that takes maturity. It takes strength. But the reward is worth it. You grow wiser. You become more balanced. You rise above the noise. Listening also teaches you patience. In a world of instant gratification, taking the time to really listen feels slow. But slow is where the truth lives. Slow is where growth happens. When you slow down, you notice more. You understand more. You react less. And the less you react, the more in control of yourself you become. That's real power, not control over others, but control over yourself. And listening is one of the best ways to build that power. You'll also find that the better you get at listening, the less you feel the need to prove yourself. You no longer seek validation through your words. You no longer try to win every conversation. You become confident in your silence. You realize that understanding others is often more important than being understood. And when people feel understood, they open up. They trust you. They respect you. That kind of connection can't be forced. It can only be earned through presence and patience. In daily life, you'll find endless opportunities to practice. The next time someone talks to you, whether it's a loved one, a colleague, or a stranger, make the decision to give them your full attention. Put your phone away. Make eye contact. Keep your mind from drifting. Don't interrupt. Don't finish their sentences, just be there. Even if the conversation is simple, the impact can be deep, because when someone feels heard, they feel valued. And people never forget how you made them feel. This habit will transform not only your relationships, but your own state of mind. You'll feel more calm, less anxious, more grounded, because you'll no longer be driven by the need to talk or be heard. You'll be driven by the desire to understand. That's what separates the wise from the loud, the quiet from the distracted. And it's a choice you can make every single day. There is something deeply human about wanting to be heard. It's a universal need, but you can only receive what you're willing to give. And if you give others your attention, your full, undivided, patient attention, you'll begin to receive something even more valuable than words. You'll receive trust, insight, respect, and real understanding. That's the quiet power of listening. It doesn't shout, it doesn't demand, it doesn't seek attention, but it changes everything. And it starts with one small, consistent decision: to be present, to stay curious, to stop talking and start paying attention. Every single time. Chapter 2. Ask thoughtful questions instead of giving quick answers. Most people rush to speak because they think their value lies in how quickly they can respond. They believe the faster they offer a solution, the smarter they appear. But in that rush to answer, they miss something important: understanding. Real understanding doesn't come from reacting. It comes from being curious, and curiosity doesn't show up as a fast reply. It shows up as a thoughtful question, the kind of question that makes someone stop and think, the kind that makes them feel you care enough to look deeper, because asking a thoughtful question is one of the most respectful things you can do for another person. It tells them you're not here to show off what you know, you're here to know them. In a conversation, your words either open someone up or shut them down. A quick answer can feel dismissive, even when you don't mean it that way. You might think you're being helpful by jumping in with advice or a solution, but if you don't understand the full story, your response misses the mark. When someone is sharing something difficult or uncertain, what they need most is not your opinion, it's your attention. And attention often takes the form of a question that slows the moment down, a question that says, "I want to understand more before I speak." That's where connection begins. This isn't about interrogating someone or trying to be clever. It's about being genuinely interested in their perspective. It's about letting go of your need to be right and choosing instead to be present. Because the truth is, most people don't even know exactly what they're feeling or thinking until someone helps them find it. A thoughtful question can be that guide. It can draw out emotions, clarify confusion, and help people say things they didn't know they needed to say. That's how questions become tools for growth, not just for others, but for you too. Asking better questions also trains your mind to slow down and listen without judgment. It helps you resist the urge to react based on your assumptions. When you ask before you speak, you give yourself time to process what's really being said, not just what you think is being said. This pause protects you from misunderstanding and gives your response more weight when you finally do speak. People trust those who take the time to understand before they advise. That trust can't be forced. It's earned one thoughtful question at a time. There's another benefit to asking questions instead of rushing to answer. You learn more. When you're always speaking, you're only hearing your own thoughts repeated. But when you ask and listen, you expose yourself to other views, new angles, different stories. And those stories expand your understanding of the world. They make you wiser, more balanced, and less reactive. The world doesn't need more fast opinions. It needs more people who know how to hold space for complexity, uncertainty, and growth. Thoughtful questions do that. They create space. This kind of presence is especially important when someone is going through pain. Most people try to help by offering solutions or sharing their own experiences. But sometimes, all someone needs is for you to sit with them and ask, "What's been the hardest part for you?" Or "What do you need most right now?" Those questions open a door. They allow the other person to step forward with trust instead of shrinking back in silence. They also help you avoid the mistake of thinking you know what's best for someone else. Because the truth is, you don't. Only they do. Your job is to create the kind of space where they can discover it. It takes discipline to ask instead of answer. It takes humility to hold back your thoughts long enough to truly understand someone else's. But that restraint builds inner strength. It teaches you that wisdom isn't about having all the answers. It's about knowing when to ask the right question. And the right question doesn't come from cleverness. It comes from care, from quiet observation, from tuning into the person in front of you instead of performing for them. And when your intention is genuine, people feel it. They open up. They speak more honestly. They reflect more deeply. That's when growth happens for them and for you. Thoughtful questions don't have to be complicated. In fact, the best ones are usually simple. What do you mean by that? Can you tell me more? What do you think would help? These kinds of questions show that you're not here to talk over someone. You're here to walk with them. And walking with someone means you care more about their path than your opinion of it. You're not trying to fix or teach or change them. You're just trying to see them clearly. And that clarity is rare. Over time, this habit changes the way you communicate. You stop rushing. You stop trying to impress. You stop needing to dominate the conversation. And as you ask better questions, people begin to treat you differently. They begin to trust you with things they don't share easily. They begin to come to you not because you have all the answers, but because they feel safe exploring their own. That's a quiet kind of influence, the kind that lasts. There's also power in asking yourself better questions. Instead of jumping to conclusions or getting stuck in assumptions, pause and ask, what am I not seeing here? Or is there another way to look at this? Self-inquiry deepens your thinking. It protects you from your own ego. It allows you to grow without needing anyone else to push you. And the more honest your questions are, the more truthful your answers will be. That's how you build inner clarity. One question at a time. You don't have to speak less to matter more. You just have to speak with more purpose. And that purpose starts with asking, not to control, not to challenge, but to understand, to see, to be present. In a world of quick answers and louder voices, asking a thoughtful question is a quiet form of leadership. It's a way to build trust, deepen relationships, and discover truth. And it starts with a decision, not to know everything, but to be curious, to be kind, to be awake enough to ask the question that matters more than your answer ever could. Chapter 3. Pause before you speak, to gather your thoughts. Most people speak without realizing how much power their words hold. They react quickly, hoping to make a point, defend themselves, or fill a silence. But in that rush, clarity gets lost. When you don't give yourself a moment to think, you let emotion lead the conversation. That split second of reaction often comes from pride, fear, or habit, not from understanding. The pause is where real strength lives. A pause gives your thoughts space to breathe. It gives your words meaning. It creates a moment of awareness that changes everything. Speaking after a pause is not the same as staying silent. It is a deliberate act. It's a choice to respond with intention instead of impulse. When you pause, Even for a brief moment, you begin to hear what's going on inside you. You recognize your emotions instead of being controlled by them. That space allows you to decide whether what you're about to say is true, helpful, and necessary. And if it's not, that pause may be the only thing that stops it from causing harm. In every conversation, you are either building trust or breaking it. That decision often happens in the space before your words come out. The pause does not have to be long. Even a few seconds can shift your entire state of mind. It allows you to step back from the rush of the moment and consider what truly matters. Do you want to win the argument, or do you want to understand? Do you want to prove your point, or do you want to connect? These are questions you can only ask yourself when you're not racing to be heard. The pause is your anchor. It keeps you grounded when emotions rise and tension builds. It protects your peace and gives others a reason to trust your presence. Most people speak to respond, not to understand. They listen just long enough to prepare their answer. But if you train yourself to wait, to truly pause, you begin to shift that pattern. You start listening with the goal of learning. You stop viewing every conversation as a competition, and instead you see it as an exchange of truth, a chance to grow, and an opportunity to bring clarity. That only happens when you slow down your need to be right and speed up your desire to be wise. The discipline of pausing builds over time. At first it feels unnatural. You may feel like you're being too quiet or too passive. But silence between thoughts is not weakness, it's maturity. It means you're no longer ruled by the urge to speak for validation. You've stepped into the role of someone who values depth over speed. You understand that being heard isn't the same as being effective, and you don't need to prove anything in every conversation because your calm speaks louder than your words ever could. There is also a deeper confidence that comes from pausing. When you give yourself time to gather your thoughts, you speak with clarity. You sound like someone who thinks before they act. That tone carries weight. People listen more closely to someone who speaks with calm, measured intent. They sense you are not easily swayed. You are not reactionary. You don't crumble under pressure. And that kind of presence is magnetic. It shows others that you respect both yourself and the moment you're in. That respect sets the tone for deeper and more meaningful exchanges. Pausing is especially important in difficult conversations. When emotions are high, the first words that come to mind are often the least helpful. Anger, frustration, or insecurity try to take over. But if you can pause, even briefly, you interrupt the pattern. You prevent yourself from saying something you'll regret. You give yourself a chance to choose dignity over drama. In that moment, you reclaim your control. You stop letting the situation dictate your behavior and start responding from a place of self-awareness. Learning to pause also helps you recognize when not to speak at all. Not every situation requires your voice. Sometimes your presence, your understanding, or your patience is enough. Speaking less doesn't mean you lack wisdom. It means you have enough of it to know when words are unnecessary. That kind of restraint requires strength, and the stronger you become internally, the less you need to assert yourself outwardly. You no longer feel pressured to fill every silence. You understand that the right words at the right time carry more value than constant talking. Pausing also deepens your relationship with yourself. It teaches you to notice your own patterns, your emotional triggers, your assumptions. Every time you take a breath before responding, you get a clearer picture of your internal state. You begin to ask, why do I feel the need to say this? Or what am I trying to protect or prove right now? These reflections lead to growth. They help you refine your communication, not by learning clever techniques, but by learning how to be more honest and more present. This habit transforms your daily life. In conversations with friends, family, co-workers, even strangers, that brief pause helps you align with who you want to be. It gives you a moment to ask yourself, is what I'm about to say in line with my values? If it's not, you stay silent or you speak differently. You don't waste energy correcting things later because you've already taken the time to get it right the first time. Over time, this builds integrity. People begin to see you as someone who speaks with purpose. Your words carry weight, not because you say more, but because you say less and mean it. The pause isn't about hesitation or fear, it's about power and clarity. It shows you are thoughtful, intentional, and focused. It also signals that you are not easily provoked, that you don't crumble when things get uncomfortable. You hold space for complexity, you make room for reflection, and in that space you find wisdom most people miss. You become someone who doesn't just react to life, but responds with care and strength. You don't need a script to become better at this. You only need to practice. The next time you feel the urge to reply quickly, stop, count to 3, breathe, then ask yourself, what am I really trying to say? And is now the right time to say it? Those few seconds can change everything. They can protect your peace, your relationships, and your sense of direction. This isn't just about talking less, it's about living with more awareness. When you pause before you speak, you don't just change the moment, you change your future. You make every word count. You become someone who doesn't waste breath, who doesn't feed arguments, who doesn't need to rush. You become someone people listen to, not out of fear or habit, but out of respect, because they know when you speak, it matters. And that kind of influence isn't loud, it's earned, one thoughtful pause at a time. Chapter 4. Watch people's behavior more than their words. Most people believe what they hear because words are easy to understand, but they often miss the truth that is being told through behavior. Words can be planned, polished, and even manipulated, but behavior reveals what is real. What someone says can be based on what they think you want to hear, but how they act shows who they are when they believe no one is watching. The deeper your desire for truth, the more you must learn to pay attention to actions. A person can promise change, speak about loyalty, or express kindness. But unless their choices reflect those things, their words mean very little. You can only build trust, connection, and clarity when you develop the discipline to look beyond what people say and notice what they consistently do. Behavior is harder to fake. While someone may be able to speak confidently or compassionately, they cannot easily hide repeated patterns of disrespect, avoidance, manipulation, or dishonesty. If someone tells you they respect you but constantly ignore your boundaries, their actions are telling the truth. If they say they care but only show up when they need something, that is what you must remember. Learning to observe how people act over time, especially under pressure, in conflict, or when no benefit is involved, gives you an honest picture of their character. This does not mean judging people quickly or harshly, but it does mean using your eyes and your mind with clarity. Listening with your ears is easy, but watching with your attention requires effort. You must be present, not distracted. You must observe patterns, not isolated moments. One kind gesture doesn't erase a history of neglect. One honest word doesn't repair months of excuses. You need to look at the full picture. The way someone treats those they don't need tells you more than how they treat those they want to impress. The way they speak when frustrated matters more than the words they use when everything is calm. If you watch long enough, people reveal everything. This kind of awareness protects your energy. It helps you stop investing in people who only offer empty promises. It shows you who is safe, who is consistent, and who deserves your trust. It also teaches you patience. You don't rush to believe or react. You give time the space to speak. Time reveals truth that words cannot. When you no longer rely only on conversations and instead begin to trust what your eyes and your intuition are telling you, your relationships change. You stop being surprised by broken trust or disappointment because you've learned to read the signals early. People often show their values not by what they claim, but by what they prioritize. If someone constantly puts their needs above others, avoids accountability, or disappears when things get hard, they are speaking through behavior. If someone keeps showing up, follows through on their word, or treats others with fairness even when it's inconvenient, they are telling you who they are through action. When you learn to see this, you no longer need explanations. You no longer chase clarity. The truth stands in front of you, even if it's unspoken. This habit of watching instead of assuming helps you create boundaries that are based on reality. You no longer give repeated chances based on hope. You no longer excuse bad behavior just because the person had the right words. You become more loyal to your peace than to false potential. This shift is not about becoming cold, it's about becoming wise. It's about protecting your time, energy, and heart from patterns that have already proven themselves. Watching behavior also sharpens your awareness of your own actions. When you start paying attention to how others act, you begin noticing how you move through the world. You ask yourself if your behavior is aligned with your values. You check if you are someone who keeps promises, respects boundaries, shows up fully, and honors others with your presence. You begin holding yourself to the same standard you expect from others, and in doing so you become more grounded, more honest, and more consistent. You learn to detach from charm. Someone might have the right tone, the perfect timing, and even the language that sounds wise. But wisdom is never in the words alone. It lives in repetition, in effort, in the quiet moments where no audience exists. The more you see that, the less you are influenced by appearance. You become someone who listens with your attention, observes with calm, and waits for the truth to reveal itself. You no longer rush to judge, but also refuse to ignore what is clearly being shown. This mindset helps you in every area of life. In work, you understand who truly delivers results, instead of just talking about plans. In friendships, you recognize who reaches out from genuine care instead of convenience. In love, you see who invests, who chooses you daily, and who keeps showing up through both joy and difficulty. You become someone who values action over explanation, effort over excuses, and honesty over empty charm. You don't confront every contradiction. Sometimes the most powerful response is quiet distance. You no longer argue about behavior that already speaks for itself. You no longer ask for clarity from someone who has already shown confusion through their choices. You learn to let people reveal themselves without interference. You give them the space to be who they are, and you accept that truth without resistance. When you start living with this level of observation, your relationships become more peaceful. You stop trying to change people through words. You allow their actions to do the work. You protect your standards by aligning your trust with behavior, not intention. You stop over-explaining your worth, and instead wait to see who naturally respects it. You hold your peace, even when tempted to respond, because you know that truth is shown in time, not in arguments. This discipline changes your conversations too. You ask better questions. You listen more closely. You observe how people respond when challenged, or when they don't get what they want. You notice how they treat others, how they handle stress, and how they react to discomfort. These moments tell you everything. You learn more from how someone acts when they're not in control than when everything is going their way. By focusing on behavior, you also become more grounded in reality. You let go of fantasy. You stop creating stories about people based on your hopes or their potential. You see what is not what you wish it was. That clarity may feel painful at times, but it is far more freeing than holding on to a version of someone that doesn't truly exist. You no longer try to fix people who don't want to grow. You respect yourself enough to walk away from patterns that hurt you, no matter how well those patterns are explained. There is great peace in accepting what someone's actions have already shown you. It allows you to stop questioning yourself. You no longer feel confused or anxious because you've learned to read what's real. You stop needing constant reassurance from others and instead build confidence in your ability to see clearly. That clarity becomes your compass. It leads you toward healthier relationships, stronger boundaries, and a deeper sense of emotional stability. When you live this way, you inspire others to live with more integrity too. Your example becomes a quiet guide. You raise the standard simply by observing the truth and refusing to settle for less. You teach through your calm, your patience, and your ability to walk away from noise. In a world full of voices, you choose to see more and say less. And that choice creates a life rooted in peace, respect, and undeniable truth. Chapter 5. Learn to sit in silence without feeling discomfort. Silence often feels like a gap that must be filled, a space too heavy to leave untouched. People rush to speak, to fill the room, to escape the stillness that exposes what's underneath. But the truth is, silence isn't empty. It's where everything real begins. In silence, distractions fall away, and you meet yourself fully. You hear the thoughts that get drowned out in noise. You notice the emotions you've been avoiding. You become present, not just with the world around you, but with the world within you. Most discomfort with silence comes not from silence itself, but from what it reveals. When you sit in stillness, there's nowhere to run. You are left with your thoughts, your fears, your insecurities, your truth. That's why silence is powerful. It doesn't hide you from yourself. The ability to sit in silence without restlessness is a skill that few practice. It requires patience, not just with time, but with the discomfort that comes with being still. It challenges the belief that value only comes from doing, speaking, producing. In silence, you're reminded that you don't always have to react. You don't always have to respond. You don't always have to explain. You can simply be, and in that being, you begin to understand things more clearly than when you're rushing through life. Many people confuse silence with loneliness or emptiness, but they are not the same. Silence is not the absence of connection. It is often the beginning of deeper connection. It allows room for thought, reflection, and presence. When you are comfortable in silence, you begin to build a relationship with yourself that isn't dependent on external validation. You discover what you truly think, how you truly feel, and what you truly value, because there's no one else in the room telling you what you should be. Discomfort in silence is a signal that your inner world needs attention. Instead of avoiding it, lean into it. Ask yourself why stillness feels uneasy. What are you afraid might rise to the surface when there's no conversation to hide behind? What truth might you hear when you stop filling every space with sound? Most people never pause long enough to hear their own clarity. They drown it out with entertainment, conversations, distractions, and obligations. But clarity lives in the quiet. Insight is born in stillness. Your deepest wisdom doesn't shout. It waits for you to slow down and listen. When you learn to sit in silence, you develop a strength that isn't dependent on anyone else. You become more resilient because you no longer need noise to feel alive. You learn how to regulate your emotions without reacting to everything around you. You stop fearing emptiness and start recognizing its value. In stillness, your nervous system calms, your thoughts settle, and your sense of self becomes more stable. You no longer seek external things to fix internal restlessness. You begin to understand that peace isn't found in more, it's found in enough. And often, enough is simply the quiet moment in front of you. Silence is also the foundation of better decision-making. When you sit in quiet, you create space between stimulus and response. You don't rush to answer, agree or react. You wait, you think. You weigh your words and your choices with intention. That pause gives you control. It helps you avoid regret. It keeps you aligned with your values, rather than pulled by emotion. In a world that rewards speed, silence teaches you the power of waiting, of breathing before acting, of thinking before speaking. And that practice, over time, becomes wisdom. Stillness teaches you patience. It slows down the anxious urge to fix, to solve, to do. It teaches you to trust that not everything needs immediate action. Some things unfold in their own time. Some answers arrive only after you've waited long enough to hear them. And some problems are only problems because you haven't yet had a moment of silence to realize they were never yours to carry. That's the gift of quiet. It helps you see more clearly not just what's present, but what's unnecessary. Being able to sit in silence also strengthens your relationships. When you no longer fear the quiet moments between words, your conversations become more meaningful. You listen with greater presence. You no longer interrupt just to keep things moving. You give space for others to speak, and you honor the weight of their silence too. Not every connection needs to be filled with words. Sometimes sitting in quiet with someone is more intimate than any conversation. It says, "I am here, I am present, I am not rushing to escape this moment." Learning to embrace silence is also a way to develop emotional mastery. When you allow yourself to feel what arises in stillness, whether it's sadness, anxiety, joy, or peace, you teach yourself that you don't have to run from discomfort. You can sit with it, you can breathe through it, you can witness it without being overwhelmed by it. And in doing so, you begin to heal parts of yourself that have long been ignored. You stop needing constant distraction to avoid your pain. You begin facing it with courage. It doesn't require hours of meditation or isolation to develop this skill. It starts with small moments. A few minutes in the morning without your phone, a walk without headphones, a pause before you speak, a quiet evening without background noise. Each of these moments builds your tolerance for stillness. Each one reminds you that silence is not an enemy, it is a guide. The more you practice, the more comfortable it becomes. And the more comfortable you become, the more power you hold. You start noticing things you once overlooked. The tone of your own thoughts, the weight of your own breath, the pull of your own attention. You begin reclaiming pieces of yourself that were scattered in constant busyness. You begin realizing that most of the answers you're seeking already exist inside you. They've just been buried under noise. Eventually, silence becomes something you seek out, not something you avoid. It becomes a form of self-care, a daily return to balance, a reminder that you are not defined by how much you do or say, but by how deeply you understand yourself. You begin protecting your quiet time with the same importance you give to your responsibilities. Because you know now that silence is not nothing, it is where everything essential begins. You realize that those who fear silence often fear themselves. But when you make peace with stillness, you stop needing approval. You stop over-explaining. You stop performing. You simply exist. Fully, calmly, truthfully. And in that space your self-worth deepens, not because someone told you who you are, but because you finally had the space to discover it yourself. That's the real power of sitting in silence without discomfort. It teaches you who you are, without needing anyone else to tell you. It brings you home to yourself. Chapter 6. Focus on what others need, not what you want. Most conversations drift toward what we want to say, what we hope to gain, what we think others should understand. But meaningful connection is not built on self-focus. It's built on the ability to recognize what the person in front of you truly needs. That's where presence begins, not with how clever you sound, but with how deeply you pay attention to what matters to them. This shift from "what do I want from this" to "what do they need right now" changes everything. It transforms shallow interaction into something useful, generous, and lasting. When you speak only from your own perspective, your words often miss the moment. They may be right, but they don't land. They may be well meant, but they feel distant. You might offer advice when someone simply needs to be heard. You might share a solution when the person really needs empathy. You might dominate the space when what's most needed is quiet support. The mistake isn't your intention, it's the assumption that your point of view is enough. It rarely is. Understanding what someone else needs requires that you stop centering your own urgency and instead listen with humility. This kind of awareness isn't passive. It's not about abandoning your own thoughts or silencing your truth. It's about understanding timing, tone, and sensitivity. It's about recognizing that your words carry weight, and how you use them determines whether you heal or harm. Most people listen with a reply already forming. They miss the subtle signs, the sigh between sentences, the eyes that glance away, the silence that stretches too long. These are not gaps in the conversation, they are the conversation. They tell you everything if you know how to notice them. To truly focus on what someone needs, you must slow down. Not just your speech, but your mind. You must resist the temptation to control the moment. You must learn to pause, observe, and feel. This pause is not weakness, it is maturity. It allows you to respond rather than react. It allows you to hold space without filling it with your own agenda. In that stillness, you discover what's actually happening beneath the surface. You begin to sense the emotional current guiding the person's words, the unspoken needs they may not even realize they have. Every person you meet is carrying something unseen. Some are overwhelmed but pretending to be fine. Some are discouraged but afraid to ask for support. Some are angry because they've been unheard for too long. If you approach them only through the lens of your own needs, you will miss these realities. But if you approach with curiosity, with care, with the intention to understand, you create a space where honesty feels safe. And when people feel safe, they stop hiding. That's when real connection happens. Focusing on what others need doesn't mean becoming a fixer. It doesn't mean you have to offer solutions or carry their burden. It means you're willing to be present without judgment. It means asking questions that open rather than close. It means setting aside your desire to be right so you can be helpful. It means caring more about being effective than being impressive. This takes practice. It requires you to unlearn the habit of constant performance. It asks you to give without the promise of getting something back. There's a strength in this kind of awareness, a calm confidence that doesn't need to dominate or prove itself. It listens with interest. It speaks only when it adds clarity. It holds back when speaking would serve no real purpose. This is not silence from fear, it is silence from wisdom. It knows that attention is sometimes more powerful than advice. It knows that giving someone your full focus is one of the rarest gifts in the world. And it knows that understanding often begins when you stop trying to be understood. When you focus on what others need, your communication becomes more impactful. You speak to their condition, not your opinion. You address the heart, not just the words. You stop offering blanket advice and start offering presence tailored to the moment. People feel seen around you. They feel respected. Not because you agree with them, but because you're willing to engage with their reality rather than impose your own. That difference builds trust, and trust is the foundation of every healthy relationship, personal or professional. This doesn't mean neglecting yourself or ignoring your own needs. On the contrary, it means developing enough self-awareness that you no longer depend on every interaction to affirm you. It means you've done enough internal work to set your ego aside when someone else is vulnerable. It means you recognize that being helpful isn't about being the loudest or smartest person in the room. It's about being attuned. It's about adjusting your presence to meet someone where they are, not where you want them to be. The discipline of focusing on others begins with listening for what's not being said. Noticing the tension in someone's shoulders, recognizing the change in their voice, asking how someone is, and actually caring about the answer. These are small acts, but they open doors that performance never will. They show people that you're not just waiting for your turn to speak. You're paying attention. You're present with their reality, not just performing your own. This mindset carries over into leadership, into friendship, into family. Leaders who focus on what their people need inspire loyalty and respect. Friends who make space for each other's emotions build relationships that last. Family members who listen without immediately offering correction create homes that feel emotionally safe. In every setting, the principle remains: people don't remember what you said nearly as much as how you made them feel. And feeling understood is one of the rarest, most healing experiences anyone can have. Training yourself to care about what others need isn't about being passive. It's about being disciplined in your attention. It's about being intentional with your energy. When someone speaks, ask yourself, what are they really trying to say? When someone's upset, don't just react. Try to understand what wound is underneath the frustration. When someone withdraws, don't rush to fill the silence. Wait and watch. This kind of thoughtful presence builds emotional intelligence. It teaches you how to hold space for complexity without needing to resolve everything instantly. There is power in quiet observation, in humility, in choosing depth over dominance, in asking, what do you need from me right now, instead of assuming you already know. That simple shift changes the emotional climate of every room you walk into. You become someone people trust, someone they feel calm around, someone who doesn't just hear their words but understands their world. And in a society flooded with noise, that kind of presence is rare and unforgettable. Chapter 7. Remove distractions and be fully present with people. The moments that matter are not always loud or dramatic. Most often, they are quiet, unannounced, and easy to miss. They live in the pauses between words, in the glance that asks for reassurance, in the slight change of someone's tone that reveals they need your attention. But when your mind is scattered, when your eyes are pulled toward screens, when you're halfway in and halfway out of the conversation, those moments pass unnoticed. Presence is not just about being there physically. It's about removing the mental clutter that keeps you from truly seeing the person in front of you. People can feel when you're not really with them. They hear it in the mechanical way you respond. They see it in your darting eyes, in the way your hand stays too close to your phone, in the lack of curiosity behind your questions. You may be nodding, but your mind is somewhere else. And over time, they stop opening up. They stop trusting you with the vulnerable parts of themselves. Not because you were cruel, but because you were distracted. And distraction, even unintentional, can feel like rejection. To be fully present, you have to make a deliberate decision to remove what doesn't belong in the moment. Not just physically, but mentally. That means silencing your devices. Yes, but more importantly, it means quieting the part of you that wants to rush ahead. The part of you that's already planning your response. The part that's thinking about your next obligation. You can't fake presence. It's something people feel. It's the depth of your attention. It's the way you hold their words, as if they're the only thing that matters. You can't expect to build trust or intimacy with anyone if you only ever give them fragments of your attention. Half listening might get you through casual conversations, but it will never create connection. True connection requires depth, and depth requires focus. If your phone is always in your hand, if your thoughts are always 5 steps ahead, if your environment is always pulling you away, you'll never reach the level of presence that relationships need to grow. People don't need you to be perfect. They just need you to be real, and that starts with being fully here. Presence is an act of respect. It says, you matter to me right now. I'm not somewhere else in my head. I'm not rushing to get through this. I'm here for you. That kind of attention is rare in a world full of noise. And because it's rare, it's powerful. It calms people. It grounds them. It makes them feel valued in a way that words alone cannot. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to be someone who shows up fully, without distraction, with your attention undivided. Removing distractions is not always easy. There are habits involved, patterns built over time. We're conditioned to multitask, to check every notification, to keep one eye on everything else just in case something more interesting appears. But that way of living fragments the mind. It leaves no room for depth. And if you never slow down enough to truly engage with the people in front of you, you're going to miss out on the richness that presence brings. You're going to feel like life is moving too fast, not because it is, but because you're never fully in it. Begin to notice how often you're pulled away from the moment. Notice how quickly your hand reaches for your phone when there's a pause in the conversation. Notice how often you think about what you're going to say next, instead of hearing what's being said now. These moments of distraction may seem small, but they add up. Over time, they become a pattern that keeps you from connection, from insight, from growth. But patterns can be changed, and presence can be practiced. Create spaces where focus is protected. When you're with someone you care about, put your phone out of sight. Not face down on the table, but completely away. Let your body language reflect your engagement. Lean in. Make eye contact. Let there be silence if it comes. Don't rush to fill every space with sound. Sometimes the deepest understanding grows in those quiet moments where nothing is said, but everything is felt. Presence doesn't always require action. Sometimes it simply requires that you stay. Being fully present also means being comfortable with not knowing. It means not always steering the conversation. It means listening even when you don't have a solution to offer. It's about making the person in front of you feel seen without needing to fix them. That kind of presence is rare, because it asks you to let go of control. But it's also healing, because it tells people they're not alone, that someone is truly with them, not trying to change them, not trying to outtalk them, just willing to walk alongside them in this moment. The more you practice presence, the more natural it becomes. And you'll start to notice things you never did before. The way someone's eyes light up when they speak about what matters to them. The small tremble in their voice when they're holding back tears. The quiet relief that washes over them when they realize you're actually listening. These things don't reveal themselves to those who rush. They unfold in the stillness, in the space created by undivided attention. Presence is not only a gift to others, it's also a gift to yourself. When you strip away distractions, you begin to feel the fullness of life again. You taste your food more deeply. You remember the details of your conversations. You stop feeling like life is slipping through your fingers. The habit of distraction may feel normal, but it dulls the experience of living. Presence sharpens it. It returns you to what's real. It brings clarity. And with clarity comes peace. There is no deep relationship without presence. There is no real leadership, no lasting influence, without the ability to focus fully on the person in front of you. You don't need to be everywhere. You just need to be here, now, with who you're with. That discipline alone will transform the quality of your connections. People are starving for attention in a world that never stops shouting. Be the person who listens. Be the one who puts the phone away. Be the one who doesn't flinch when silence stretches. That kind of presence will speak louder than anything you could say. Chapter 8. Reflect on conversations to find what you missed. Conversations are more than exchanges of words. They're mirrors, maps, and signals all at once. But in the rush of daily life, it's easy to miss what was truly said. The truth of a moment rarely arrives in its most obvious form. It comes quietly, tucked between pauses, gestures, and shifts in tone. You might walk away from a conversation thinking it was routine, nothing significant, only to realize hours later there was something deeper beneath the surface, something you didn't catch in real time. That's why reflection matters. It turns ordinary moments into insight. It helps you recognize what slipped past your attention while you were focused on speaking, reacting, or simply keeping the exchange moving. When you take time to think about what was said, you start to understand what was really meant. You begin to pick up on the hesitation that didn't match the words. You remember the slight tremble in their voice when they changed the subject. You recall how someone's expression fell for just a second after you responded too quickly. These aren't dramatic things. They're quiet signals, often buried beneath the noise of conversation, easy to overlook, unless you go back and revisit them in your mind. This kind of reflection is not about obsessing or replaying every interaction out of insecurity. It's about being curious. It's about respecting communication enough to give it a second look. It's asking yourself, did I really understand what they were trying to say? It's wondering whether you missed a chance to be kinder, to listen more closely, to notice what was unsaid. It's not about regret, it's about growth. It's about becoming someone who doesn't just go through conversations, but grows through them. Often the most important parts of a dialogue aren't spoken with words. They show up in the timing, in the patterns, in the things people avoid saying. If you're only listening to what's loudest, you'll miss what's most meaningful. But when you reflect, you give your mind the chance to revisit and reinterpret. Something that seemed unimportant in the moment may reveal itself as a clue later on, a sign of someone's emotional state, a request for help wrapped in casual language, or even a quiet boundary being drawn. Sometimes when you look back at a conversation, you realize you didn't really listen. Maybe you were distracted, focused on your own response, or caught up in your own assumptions. In those moments of reflection, you see how you could have responded differently, not out of guilt, but from a desire to be more present next time. It's not about correcting the past, it's about preparing yourself to show up more intentionally in the future. You might also notice how often people repeat themselves, not because they're forgetful, but because they don't feel heard. When you reflect, you begin to catch these patterns. You see how someone keeps returning to a topic, hoping you'll finally understand. You recognize when someone says something for the third time in a different way, trying to make it clearer, trying to be received. That realization gives you the opportunity to circle back, to reach out and say, "I think I missed something earlier. Can we talk about that again?" That one moment of humility can rebuild bridges that were starting to erode. Reflection also teaches you about yourself. You start to recognize your habits. Maybe you interrupt more than you thought. Maybe you rush to give advice when someone just wanted empathy. Maybe you avoid certain topics because they make you uncomfortable, even when the other person needs you to go there with them. These are not flaws, they're blind spots. And blind spots only become visible when you pause long enough to notice what you've been overlooking. Even small conversations carry weight when you reflect on them. You begin to remember how someone looked when they said they were fine. You recall how they laughed, but it didn't reach their eyes. These aren't things you can always respond to in the moment, especially if you weren't sure what they meant. But reflection gives you the opportunity to follow up. You might send a message later, or ask a question the next day, or simply check in with a different kind of tone. That kind of attentiveness shows people they matter, not just in the moment, but in the memory you carry of them afterward. Being thoughtful doesn't mean overthinking every interaction. It means staying open to the idea that you don't always catch everything the first time. It means believing that there's value in looking back. In that space of quiet review, you gain a second chance to understand. You develop the kind of awareness that builds trust, not just with others but within yourself. You come to know yourself better, not by speaking more, but by thinking more deeply about how you've spoken and listened. Conversations don't end when the words stop. They linger, they echo, and sometimes the most important understanding comes after the fact. That's when things settle. That's when your emotions fade and your awareness sharpens. You remember what was said. You remember how it made you feel. And most importantly, you remember what it revealed about them, about you, about the dynamic between you both. These are the insights that build emotional intelligence. They don't come when you're moving too fast. They come when you make space to slow down and revisit the moment. There's humility in reflection. It's a quiet admission that you don't always get it right the first time, that you're willing to learn from how you showed up. Izo Shuing to learn from how you showed up, that you care enough to go back and understand more fully. And the more you do this, the more naturally it becomes part of how you relate to others. You catch yourself mid-conversation, already more aware, already adjusting, already present in a deeper way. That's how reflection shapes real growth. It doesn't stay in the past. It informs your next step. What you missed before becomes what you catch next time. What you misunderstood before becomes what you clarify now. What you overlooked in one moment becomes what you embrace in the future. This process isn't about looking for mistakes. It's about building wisdom. Because wisdom doesn't arrive in real time. It's often born after the fact, in the quiet moment when you ask yourself, what did I really learn from that exchange? Reflecting on conversations isn't just a tool for better communication, it's a practice of awareness. It's a quiet discipline that sharpens your insight, deepens your empathy, and strengthens your relationships. When you make time to revisit what was said, you begin to hear what was truly meant. And in that understanding, you become someone who sees people more clearly, who hears with more than just ears, and who grows from every word, not just the ones you speak, but the ones you take time to understand. Chapter 9. Speak only when your words add real value. There's a deep strength in knowing when not to speak. It doesn't come from being timid. It doesn't come from insecurity. It comes from understanding the weight of your voice. When you begin to realize that every word you offer shapes how people feel, think, and respond, you start to treat your voice with care. You become more intentional, more deliberate, more responsible with the space you occupy in a conversation. Speaking becomes less about being heard and more about contributing something meaningful, something that moves the moment forward instead of just filling it with noise. Too often, people speak to escape silence, to avoid discomfort, or to make sure they're seen. But words, when spoken without purpose, lose their power. They clutter interactions. They dilute meaning. They blur the line between connection and performance. But when you learn to wait, when you choose to hold back until you truly have something of value to offer, you begin to stand out in the quietest way. Your words carry weight because you don't waste them. You don't speak to dominate, impress, or control. You speak because there's something that matters more than the act of speaking itself. There's a difference between filling a gap and adding meaning. A pause in conversation doesn't always need to be interrupted. Not every silence is a sign that something's wrong. Sometimes, what people need most isn't your opinion, your advice, or your reaction. Sometimes, they need your presence, your patience, your quiet understanding. And if you learn to sit with them in that space, without rushing to offer a solution, you start to see what words are actually needed, if any at all. Speaking only when you add real value requires inner clarity. It requires knowing what you believe, why you're saying something, and whether your voice will actually bring insight or comfort to the moment. If you're speaking to feel important, you'll likely miss the opportunity to make someone else feel understood. But if your focus is to elevate the conversation, to bring a sense of care, depth, or honesty, your words will reach further than you think. You can always tell when someone speaks from a place of presence. Their tone is grounded. Their pace is calm. Their language isn't rushed or reactive. They're not looking for attention. They're offering something of substance. And even if they say little, what they do say stays with you. That's the kind of voice that builds trust, that earns respect, that lingers long after the conversation ends. Sometimes, the value of what you say isn't in how much you share, but in how clearly and thoughtfully you say it. You might speak briefly, but with such intention that your message lands with strength. Or you might choose to ask a powerful question instead of offering a long explanation. There are moments when a single honest sentence does more than a full speech ever could. Because it's not volume that creates impact, it's depth. It takes discipline to hold your voice until it's needed. It means resisting the urge to correct someone when it's not helpful. It means not jumping into a discussion just to be included. It means listening long enough to understand before deciding whether your words will serve a purpose. You start measuring your responses not by how fast you can give them, but by how much they contribute to clarity, understanding, or support. You'll notice that the more you speak only when there's value, the more people start to listen differently. They begin to associate your voice with meaning. They don't tune you out. They pay attention because they know you don't speak just to fill the space. And in return, the quality of your communication improves. Conversations become more respectful. Exchanges become more intentional. Trust deepens, not through quantity of words, but through the quality behind them. There's also a form of quiet leadership in this practice. People are drawn to those who don't need to dominate the room to influence it. When you speak less, but with more insight, your presence commands attention without demanding it. People begin to notice that you don't rush to speak, and when you do, it's with clarity. That creates credibility, not just in what you say, but in who you are. Of course, this doesn't mean staying silent forever or never expressing yourself. It's not about withholding truth or suppressing your thoughts. It's about discernment. It's about asking yourself, does what I'm about to say help? Does it bring light to this moment? Will it lift the conversation or just shift attention to me? If the answer is yes, then speak with confidence. But if the answer is no, then holding your tongue is not a sign of weakness. It's a quiet strength. You'll also begin to understand that timing matters. The right words at the wrong time can fall flat or even cause harm. But when you've taken the time to listen, to observe, and to reflect, your words arrive with better timing. They come from awareness instead of impulse. They meet the moment rather than miss it. And when they land, they offer something that wasn't there before: clarity, calm, perspective, or encouragement. Learning to speak with value also involves honesty. Sometimes the most valuable thing you can say is something simple and direct that others might avoid. It may not always be what someone wants to hear, but if it's delivered with kindness and clarity, it can make a real difference. This is especially true when everyone else is saying what's easy or popular. Speaking truthfully, but not harshly, can offer a kind of grounding that others will quietly appreciate, even if they don't express it in the moment. There will also be times when the value of your words lies in your ability to bring people together, to name what others feel but haven't yet said, or to offer hope when things feel uncertain. That kind of speaking doesn't come from trying to impress. It comes from caring enough to pay attention and waiting long enough to speak from a deeper place. You don't need to constantly explain yourself to be understood. You don't have to talk more to be valued. Sometimes the most memorable people are the ones who speak less but offer more with each word. They don't waste time with noise. They use their voice when it matters most, and that's what makes people listen. In a world full of endless conversation, the ones who bring quiet meaning become the voices that rise above the rest, not through volume, not through repetition, but through intention, precision, and purpose. You can choose to be one of those voices, not by speaking constantly, but by speaking consciously, not by trying to be the loudest, but by choosing to speak only when your words truly offer something worth hearing. Chapter 10. Build deep trust by understanding, not by talking more. Trust is not something that grows from the quantity of words exchanged. It is cultivated through the quality of understanding shared between people. Many believe that speaking more, explaining, convincing, and justifying is the way to build trust, but the truth lies deeper. Trust is a quiet force born in the spaces where listening, empathy, and genuine comprehension take precedence over talking. It is the fruit of connection rooted in awareness, not noise. To build trust, you must first commit to truly understanding the other person. This means stepping beyond your own perspective and assumptions. It means setting aside your need to respond immediately or to be right. Instead, the goal shifts to absorbing what is truly being communicated, not just with words but with silence, gestures, and emotions. This kind of understanding demands humility. It requires admitting that you do not have all the answers and that your role is to receive what is offered with care and attention. When you listen with this depth, the other person feels seen and valued. They recognize that you're not merely waiting for your turn to speak, but that you're engaged on a level that transcends surface conversation. This recognition forms the bedrock of trust. People instinctively trust those who don't rush to judge or correct, but who instead create a space where their truth can be heard without interruption or dismissal. The act of understanding involves patience. It is rarely immediate. Sometimes it means sitting with discomfort, unanswered questions, or unclear emotions until clarity emerges. This patience signals to others that you respect the pace of their process. You're willing to walk alongside them without pushing or pulling. That steady presence, free from pressure or demand, nurtures trust more effectively than any flood of words. Building trust through understanding also means refraining from filling every silence. There is power in quietness. Often, when people pause, it's because they are processing, gathering courage, or deciding how much to reveal. When you allow space without forcing conversation, you communicate acceptance. You say, "I'm here, and I'm willing to wait." This silent support can be more affirming than 1,000 spoken reassurances. An essential part of this process is recognizing the limits of your knowledge and control. Trust grows in an atmosphere where people feel safe, not because everything is controlled or explained, but because they are met with genuine openness. It means being comfortable with not having to fix things immediately or solve every problem with words. Your role becomes one of steady support rather than relentless solution finding. Actions often speak louder than words in building trust. When your behavior consistently reflects understanding through kindness, reliability, and attentiveness, people begin to rely on you. They see that your silence is not absence but respect, that your patience is not indifference but care. These quiet demonstrations create a foundation where trust can grow resilient and deep. Understanding also calls for sensitivity to unspoken messages. Sometimes what is not said carries more weight than what is. The tone of voice, the pause before answering, the subtle body language, these details reveal layers of meaning. When you attune yourself to these signs, you communicate a level of attentiveness that words alone cannot convey. This kind of connection assures others that you're present in the fullest sense. Deep trust cannot be hurried. It is a slow, deliberate unfolding that depends on consistency. Occasional words of reassurance mean little if they aren't matched by ongoing understanding and presence. Trust accumulates through small, repeated moments where you prioritize connection over conversation. It's the patient daily practice of showing up, listening well, and honoring what is shared. There is also a profound strength in embracing silence as part of trust building. When you resist the urge to dominate a conversation or to fill it with explanations, you give trust room to breathe. Silence allows for reflection and mutual respect. It gives people space to feel safe in their vulnerability, knowing they won't be overwhelmed or dismissed by your need to talk. In relationships, the temptation is often to fix issues by talking more, but true resolution comes from understanding the root, not merely the symptoms. When you slow down and listen deeply, you uncover what matters most to the other person. This insight enables you to respond thoughtfully, not reactively. Your responses become bridges, not barriers. Ultimately, trust is a gift given in response to presence. It flourishes where people feel heard, respected, and genuinely understood. It does not require elaborate explanations or constant verbal reassurance. Instead, it thrives in the quiet spaces created by sincere listening, empathy, and patience. When you prioritize understanding over talking, you align yourself with a higher form of communication, one that connects hearts and minds without excess noise. This kind of trust is durable. It withstands challenges because it is founded on truth and respect, not on superficial words. Choosing to build trust through understanding requires a shift in mindset. It means valuing silence as much as speech, depth as much as volume, and connection as much as expression. It is a daily discipline that transforms not only your relationships, but your own character. By mastering this, you become a person whose presence alone invites confidence, openness, and loyalty. This journey toward deep trust asks for courage and self-control. It asks you to release the need to always have the last word or to always be heard. Instead, it invites you to become a guardian of meaningful connection, someone who speaks not to fill space but to deepen it. In the end, the power of trust lies not in what you say, but in how well you understand and in how faithfully you show up to listen with your whole being.